Hi everyone, and welcome to my belated Victober wrap-up. I read all the books on my TBR plus one, so it was a pretty successful Victober overall. First, I read The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. I feel like Wells is not an author that people usually associate with Victorian literature, and that might be because he mostly is famous for science fiction, which isn't a genre that other popular Victorian authors were writing. For me, part of what made the Victorian era so exciting is the spirit of innovation in science. It feels like discoveries which could radically change humanity's understanding of the world were around every corner. And that's something that I really appreciate about Wells is that he was ambitious enough to incorporate these contemporary scientific concepts into his writing. So for Victober, I read two of Wells' books, The Time Machine and The War of the Worlds. The Time Machine is about an English inventor who builds an actual time machine. According to Wikipedia, Wells coined the term time machine and popularized its use for time travel. So our time traveler, who is literally just called the time traveler, travels thousands of years into the future. Although he's smart enough to build a time machine, he's apparently not clever enough to take food or weapons, and that's because he assumes that the society of the future will be incredibly technologically advanced and he won't have a need for any of these things. But as I'm learning, Wells likes to surprise his audience. Instead of a utopia, the time traveler finds a group of humanoid creatures called the Eloi, who are frail, gentle, childlike, and also very stupid. Later on, the time traveler finds a second group of humanoid creatures called the Morlocks. They're also very stupid, but unlike the Eloi, they're hyper-aggressive and violent. Somehow the Morlocks manage to steal the time traveler's time machine. So the story is basically the time traveler looking for his time machine while trying to puzzle out what is going on in this future world. For the time traveler's thought process, Wells draws on Darwinian theory as well as socialist and other frameworks. Even if you don't agree with these perspectives, the way that Wells enmeshes them into the story is incredibly impressive. Another thing I love about this book is the richness of detail. For example, in describing the actual process of time travel, another author might talk about flashing, disorienting lights or how everything went dark. But Wells writes how time passed so quickly that the surface of the earth melted and flowed, and the movement of the sun appeared as a fiery arch across the sky. Wells uses the same richness of detail in The War of the Worlds. This book describes a Martian invasion of the Earth. The first half or so describes the Martians landing and wreaking absolute havoc on England. The second half focuses on a single narrator who is hiding from and watching the Martians. The second half reminded me a little bit of Cormac McCarthy's The Road for its survivalist elements. There's also a twist ending. I like this book, but probably not as much as The Time Machine. First, the motivations of the Martians that just did not seem super clear to me. Also, although I liked the twist ending, it didn't seem believable that the Martians, with all of their technology, weren't able to foresee the outcome. Also, I didn't really care for Wells' description of the military and government response. It felt incomplete in some way, and I think it might be because we're so used to social media and mass communications and global responses to events that the absence of that made it just too jarring. So, in this respect, the book feels a bit dated, but overall, I really liked it and I recommend it. Next is the Victorian Short Story Challenge. For this, I read The Haunted Man and The Ghost's Bargain by Charles Dickens. This is one of Dickens' Christmas stories, and it follows a chemistry professor who has many, many regrets about his past life. One night, the professor asks a ghost to erase his past memories so that he doesn't suffer anymore. The ghost grants him his wish, but on top of that, he also gives him the ability to erase other people's memories. In addition, a raggedy little boy who also seems supernatural starts following the professor around. So there are just a lot of moving parts to the story, and I kind of feel like it was a little bit too much. I also didn't really feel emotionally engaged with any of the characters, and I think that's part of, my problem with some short stories with, characters with painful backgrounds is that we just don't get enough time to develop sympathy for them. Anyway, Dickens is a bit of a hit or miss for me, and this unfortunately was a miss. Next up is Victorian poetry, and I really like this prompt because I just don't read enough poetry and I really need to. For this prompt, I read some of the work of Alfred Lord Tennyson. Um, in particular, I read some of his poems about death and mourning, and I really liked I Wage Not Any Feud with Death. That was really great poem. And I also liked I Envy Not in Any Moods, which is a poem that gave us the line, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. So overall, I like Tennyson, and I'll probably read more of his work in the future. And finally, I read The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy, which was the group read for the month. I have a whole reading vlog and review about The Mayor of Casterbridge on my channel, so if you want to check that out, feel free. But I won't do an in-depth review here. I will say that I did like it. It has some really interesting themes, and the character of Michael Henchard was fantastically developed. So I do recommend you check it out. So that's it for my Victober wrap up. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.